and that he was so angry that she wanted to get away from him. She always told me that she wanted to leave, but that she couldn't.
It was Wednesday morning, May 10th, 2023. Just after 7:30 a.m., the streets were quiet. The air was still. Near a gas station on the 800 block of South Walton Walker Boulevard, a shadow of unease crept over Melanie Rubio as she walked past the nearly empty parking lot. Then she saw her, Gabriella Gonzalez. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was him, Harold Thompson, a man she had been trying to distance herself from for over 2 months. Melanie's steps slowed. Something felt off. The parking lot was nearly deserted. Why were they meeting here of all places? And why now? She had just rented a car for an important trip. If they needed to talk, why not in her vehicle? Melanie's pulse quickened. A knot tightened in her stomach. Something wasn't right. Seconds passed. Then, a gunshot. The sound cracked through the morning air like a lightning strike. A brief pause. A silence that lasted only a heartbeat. Then, several more shots. Melanie's world froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Her body turned cold. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Then instinct took over. She spun around. Her eyes locked onto the sight she would never forget. Gabriella was on the ground, motionless, a pool of deep red spreading beneath her. Harold was already running, fleeing the scene. Within minutes, sirens screamed through the streets. Law enforcement arrived at the scene, but it was already too late. Gabriella Gonzalez, 26 years old, gone. The moment law enforcement arrived at the scene, they wasted no time. Witnesses were questioned one by one, but the first person they turned to was Melanie Rubio. The officer asked Melanie if she knew the victim. Melanie's response sent a chill through the air. "She is my sister." Her voice trembled. The weight of those words crushed the space around her. She had come to meet Gabriella that morning. She'd arrived the night before from Colorado. This wasn't just any reunion. It was a meeting of reassurance, a chance to make sure Gabriella was okay. But instead, she was gone. From that moment, Melanie became the voice of her sister's story, a story of dreams, struggles, hope, and heartbreak. Gabriella Gonzalez was born on January 3rd, 1997, the eldest daughter in her family. From a young age, she stood out, not just for her beauty, but for her heart. She was the kind of person who carried warmth wherever she went. At home, she was her father's confidant, her mother's helper, a steady presence who held the family together. Her family described her as their balance. Whenever someone needed guidance or comfort, they turned to her. To Gabriella, or Gabby as they lovingly called her. After graduating high school, she worked tirelessly juggling different jobs to build a future for herself. And it was during this time that she met Victor Gonzalez. Victor was just starting his life as well. Their age gap wasn't significant, but to Gabriella, he represented stability, love, a future. Their relationship moved quickly. By 2015, they welcomed their first child. Parenthood became their shared purpose. They worked hard to provide for their growing family, and over the next few years, their love brought 2 more daughters into their lives. But what began as a romance filled with dreams and devotion slowly started to shift. By early 2022, the fractures in their relationship became impossible to ignore. Gabriella made the difficult decision to separate after more than 8 years together. But this was not a bitter ending. Unlike so many others, theirs was a separation built on mutual understanding. They agreed to stay friends, to co-parent with love. They never severed ties completely. They even remained connected on Facebook. To the world, it looked like a peaceful ending, a fresh start. But Gabriella's story was far from over. What she didn't know was that her greatest mistake was yet to come. Gabriella worked tirelessly to create a safe and stable life for her 3 children. To her, motherhood was everything. She wanted to raise them in a way that would make her proud. Every choice she made was with them in mind. For years, that was her focus. Until October 2022, when she met Harold Lavance Thompson. From the very first moment, he showered her with attention, compliments, affection. Gabriella, after years in a relationship that had become routine, found herself drawn in. She was still only 25. The words he whispered felt like a key unlocking a part of her heart she thought had been forgotten. He was younger, by 4 years, but he carried himself with a maturity that reassured her. Or at least, that's what he wanted her to believe. When he learned she was a mother of 3, he didn't hesitate. He embraced it. He told her he wanted to be a part of her world, to love her children, and so she let him in. For the first month, everything felt perfect. the rush of new love, the thrill of something different. But then came the moment that shattered the illusion. November 22nd, 2022. That was the day Gabriella realized she had made a mistake. That night, Thompson walked into her home. Something in his expression was different, darker. He had overheard her on the phone, talking to Victor, the father of her children. The moment he understood who she was speaking to, his face twisted with anger, and asked her, "Why are you still talking to him?" His voice was sharp, accusing. Gabriella, caught off guard, tried to explain. But Gabriella told him that, "He's the father of my kids. We have to talk. This isn't about the past. It's about them." But that wasn't enough for Thompson. In his mind, this was betrayal. He saw no reason for her to maintain any connection to her ex. No reason for her to speak to him at all. And then, the moment Gabriella would never forget, Thompson's rage exploded. His words turned into insults, accusations, and then his hands followed. It was the first time he hurt her, and it wouldn't be the last. When Gabriella filed a report that night, she described the way he focused on her face, as if he wanted to erase the beauty he once claimed to love. The next day, Thompson apologized. His voice was soft again, full of regret. He told her he lost control, that it was a moment of weakness, that it would never happen again. Gabriella hesitated. She wanted to believe him. Maybe it was just one mistake. Maybe if she gave him a second chance, things would get better. So she did, and for a few days it seemed like she had made the right decision. He was careful with his words, more patient. He asked about her day, checked in on her feelings. It felt like love, but it wasn't love. It was control. It didn't take long for the mask to slip. At first, it was subtle. His tone when she didn't reply fast enough. The way his eyes darkened when she glanced at her phone. The questions that sounded like conversations, but felt like interrogations. Where were you? Who were you with? Why didn't you answer? Then the tension grew. The pauses in their conversations became heavy. The kindness in his voice turned into something colder, more demanding. Gabriella began to sense it. The shifts, the warning signs. And then, it happened again. One evening she was on the phone, smiling at something. Thompson was watching. He didn't need to hear the words. The way she looked, comfortable, happy, at ease, was enough to send him into a silent rage. To him, it wasn't just a call. It was a threat, a reminder that she had a life beyond his control. Without warning, he lunged. His hand clamped around her wrist, tight, painful. She gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip was like steel. The phone was ripped from her fingers, and before she could say a word, the device shattered against the floor. Pieces of glass scattered across the room. Gabriella stood frozen, her heart pounding. It wasn't just anger. It was a message. Nothing in her life belonged to her anymore, not even herself. After that night, Gabriella began to pull away. Her family noticed the change immediately. Gabriella had never been the kind of person to disappear. Family was everything to her. So when the calls became less frequent, when the visits stopped, when she became a ghost in their lives, they knew something was wrong. When her mother and sister Melanie visited her at home, what they saw was not the Gabriella they knew. She was distant, dull, a shadow of herself. The warmth in her eyes had faded, replaced by something hollow, a sadness that clung to her like a heavy weight. She barely spoke. When she did, her words were short, hesitant, as if afraid of saying too much. Melanie knew. She felt it and told her that she needs to leave him. She pleaded with her sister, told her that Thompson was changing her, that if she stayed with him long enough, she wouldn't recognize herself anymore. Gabriella knew Melanie was right. Deep down, she had already made her decision. But there was something else, a fear creeping in the back of her mind. Her body felt different. Something wasn't right. Her cycle was late. The thought of carrying Thompson's child sent a cold shiver through her. This was the one thing that could make everything worse. The one thing that would trap her forever in a life she was desperately trying to escape. She needed time. But for some reason she told him. When Gabriella told Thompson that she might be pregnant, his reaction was the complete opposite of hers. He was overjoyed, excited, talking about their future, a future she didn't want. She had been a mother before. She knew what it meant to bring a child into the world. A father's role mattered, and the thought of this man raising her baby, that was the real nightmare. For a brief moment, Gabriella hoped maybe this would change him. Maybe he would become the man he pretended to be in the beginning. But nothing changed. If anything, he became worse. Then came March 2023. For the second time, Thompson's anger turned violent. It started with another argument, the same accusations, the same possessiveness. But this time when he lashed out, the injuries were severe. When Gabriella later described it in a report, she detailed the way her eye was swollen and bruised so badly it barely opened. When law enforcement questioned Thompson over the phone, he denied everything and told them that she attacked him first. But Gabriella knew the truth, and this time, she wasn't going to stay. The child growing inside her could not have this man as a father. He would never be a role model, never be someone she could trust around her kids, so she made her choice. She told Thompson their relationship was over. She told him to stay away. She told him to let her go. But she underestimated him. For 2 months, she endured his relentless pursuit, his constant presence in her life, his threats, his emotional games, until finally, she made the hardest decision a mother could make. She could not bring this child into the world, not with him as the father. But in Texas, after the laws changed in 2022, she knew there was no legal way for her to end the pregnancy. Under the current restrictions, what had once been a difficult choice was now an impossible one. On May 8th, 2023, so she made a plan that would take her 800 miles away. She rented a car, packed a bag, and set off for Colorado. She wasn't just driving to another state, she was driving toward freedom. She thought this would be the end of the nightmare. But Thompson had other plans. For 3 days, Gabriella disappeared from Texas. 3 days of silence. 3 days where Harold Thompson spiraled. He searched everywhere, called her over and over. Desperation creeping into every unanswered ring, every message left unread. Where was she? Why had she left? Then, she came back. She reached out to her sister Melanie. She told her where to find her. South Walton Walker Boulevard. She also told her something else. She wasn't pregnant anymore. For the first time in months, she sounded relieved. Melanie felt the weight lift off her sister's voice. They both knew. This was the fresh start Gabriella had been fighting for. But there was still one last thing left to do. Harold Thompson needed to hear the truth. The relationship was over. There was nothing tying them together anymore. She was done. May 10th, 2023. The sun had barely risen over Texas when Gabriella stood face to face with Harold Thompson. Witnesses later recalled the heated argument. Words flew back and forth between them. Gabriella stood her ground, firm, unshaken, and then she told him. She was no longer carrying his child. Whatever fragile grip Thompson thought he had on her was now completely gone. In that moment, something inside him snapped. Rage, loss, control slipping through his fingers. He lunged at her. His hands closed around her throat in a vicious chokehold. Gabriella fought back, her survival instincts kicking in. She broke free, staggered backward, but before she could get away, gunfire ripped through the air. Her sister Melanie heard everything. The first shot shattered the morning stillness. Then a pause, a breath, a silence, and then several more. Melanie turned just in time to see Gabriella collapse to the ground. He ran. He vanished into the morning, leaving behind the woman whose future he had just erased. By the time law enforcement arrived, it was too late. Gabriella Gonzalez, 26 years old, a mother, a sister, a fighter, gone. For investigators, the case was clear. The suspect was known. The crime had been witnessed. But one critical element remained, evidence that would leave no room for doubt. They needed something undeniable, something that would force Harold Thompson to face the truth. So they turned to the surveillance cameras around the parking lot. Within 5 hours, they found exactly what they needed. The footage told the story in brutal detail, frame by frame. At the gas station, Thompson could be seen grabbing Gabriella by the throat, attempting to strangle her. She fought back, managed to break free, desperate, shaken, searching for her phone. She needed help, but her phone was later found abandoned in her rental car. Never used, never dialed. Moments later, as Gabriella walked toward the parking lot, Thompson pulled out a weapon and fired. There was no question, no way to deny what had happened. With this irrefutable evidence, law enforcement moved fast. That same day, Wednesday, May 10th, 2023, at exactly 6:30 p.m., Harold Lavance Thompson was arrested and booked into Dallas County Jail without bond. The news of Gabriella Gonzalez's death sent shockwaves through everyone who knew her. A 26-year-old mother of 3, a woman who had fought tirelessly for her children, was gone. Local news channels reported on the tragedy. Across social media, the community reacted with disbelief, outrage, fear. The idea that a man would retaliate this brutally, in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, because she had ended the pregnancy without his knowledge was chilling. People struggled to make sense of it. In a televised interview, Gabriella's sister Melanie spoke through tears about what her sister had endured.
Melanie Rubio hides a face full of grief.
My sister was very beautiful. She was so sweet.
Hoping to find justice for the murder of 26-year-old Gabriella Gonzalez.
I just feel anger towards him.
Dallas police arrested Gonzalez's ex-boyfriend, 22-year-old Harold Thompson, accused in her killing. It happened Wednesday morning at a gas station on Walton Walker Boulevard in Oak Cliff. Her family says the two had been arguing after Gonzalez ended a tumultuous 4-month relationship.
And that he was so angry that she wanted to get away from him.
A search of Thompson's criminal history shows an active arrest warrant for assault and family violence. Gonzalez's mother showed us the Dallas police report officially filed by the family in March. Court records also report Thompson abusing Gonzalez while she was pregnant.
And she always told me that she wanted to leave, but that she couldn't.
Her family says it all culminated into a final argument. Gonzalez had just returned this week from a trip to Colorado to get an abortion. An arrest report states Thompson was believed to be the father of the child. Police records say surveillance video shows him putting Gonzalez in a chokehold Wednesday before later shooting her in the head. He then fled and Gonzalez died on the scene. Tragically, her sister witnessed the murder.
I was in shock. I couldn't touch her. I couldn't move. My body froze.
In Spanish, her mother describes the heartbreak of losing her oldest daughter. And the pain for Gonzalez's own 3 children who will spend this Mother's Day at her memorial.
My mom is broken, that she won't see her again.
How Thompson had controlled her, how the entire family had tried to help, but didn't know how to pull her away from him. And now, it was too late. Gabriella's family was devastated. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a mother, but as grief consumed them, another painful reality surfaced. They weren't prepared for the overwhelming costs of a funeral, so they turned to GoFundMe. The fundraiser was met with an outpouring of support. People donated. Strangers left messages of solidarity and sorrow. Among them, one comment stood out, a message from a survivor of domestic abuse. My heartfelt condolences go out to Gabby's children and family. This story was just horrendous. The police did nothing to protect her. My only wish is that Gabby would have packed up her children and gone to a shelter. Women need to take their abusers' threats seriously and get far away. Most importantly, cut off communication. These acts of violence happen far too frequently in our society. I know her mother and sister will do all they can to raise Gabby's children with love and support. This is absolutely heartbreaking, that such an evil monster took a beautiful, loving mother away from her family. I hope he never gains his freedom. May Gabby sleep in peace. God bless her family. Gabriella's story had become more than just a tragedy. It was a warning, a plea to others trapped in toxic relationships. Because for Gabriella, freedom came too late. Harold Lavance Thompson was formally charged with first-degree homicide. From the very start, prosecutors built an airtight case. The defense attorney representing him was never publicly named, but what was revealed about the trial was enough to send chills through the community. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a moment of uncontrollable rage. This was a pattern, a relentless cycle of abuse that ended in a premeditated act. The prosecution presented every piece of evidence, the surveillance footage, the police reports, the messages that documented months of threats and harassment. They proved that the events of May 10th, 2023, weren't random. They were the final act of a violent and calculated obsession. And then, there was the revelation that no one saw coming. The courtroom was stunned when prosecutors revealed that Thompson had an active arrest warrant at the time of the crime. Not only that, he had a criminal history tied to firearms possession dating back to 2020 and 2021. Yet, those charges had been dismissed. Had they not been, Gabriella might still be alive. The weight of the evidence was impossible to ignore. No excuses, no second chances, only justice. February 2025. Inside a Dallas County courtroom, Judge Chica Anyam delivered the final verdict. Life in a state correctional facility. There would be no escape, no future beyond prison walls. Harold Lavance Thompson, the man who had spent months trying to control Gabriella's life, would now spend the rest of his own behind bars. For Gabriella's family, the sentence brought a sense of closure, but not relief, because no punishment could bring her back. No amount of justice could erase the loss. All that remained was the memory of a young mother who had fought for her freedom, but never got the chance to live it. Gabriella Gonzalez's story is not just about one woman. It's about countless victims trapped in cycles of control, fear, and violence. Her case shines a harsh light on the reality of domestic abuse, the way it escalates, the way it isolates, and the way it too often ends in silence. But it doesn't have to. If you or someone you know is in an unsafe relationship, please remember this: abuse always escalates. What starts with control can end in tragedy. Your life matters more than the relationship. If they make you feel trapped, it's time to get out. No one changes overnight. Promises mean nothing without actions. Cut off communication. Staying in touch only gives them more control. Seek support, whether from family, friends, or organizations that help survivors. You are never alone. Gabriella deserved more time, more life, more freedom. For those still in similar situations, please don't wait. Get out, get safe before it's too late. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.